Welcome, everyone. I'm Brandon Kiger, today's webinar host. I am a contractor supporting the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs Tribal Energy Webinar Series. Today's webinar, titled Federal Support for Intertribal Organizations, is the fourth webinar of the 2024 DOE Tribal Energy Webinar Series. Let's go over some event details. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on DOE's Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs website in about 1 week. Copies of today's presentation slides will be posted to the Office of Indian Energy's website shortly after this webinar. Everyone will receive a post-webinar email with a link to the page where the slides and recording will be located. Because we are recording this webinar, all phones have been muted. We will answer your written questions at the end of today's final presentation. However, you may submit a question at any time by clicking on the question button located in the webinar control panel on your screen. Let's get started with opening remarks and a presentation from Jamie Alley. Jamie is an engineer and a project officer for the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs, duty stationed here in Golden, Colorado, and has over 20 years of experience in construction, clean energy project development, and project management. As a project officer, she administers financial assistance awards to Indian nations, Alaska Native villages, and intertribal organizations. Jamie joined the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Indian Energy this year after previously working nearly 15 years as a federal contractor, supporting the Office of Indian Energy as a technical project monitor. Jamie was raised near Denver, Colorado, and holds a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the Colorado School of Mines. Jamie, the virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you, Brandon, and hello, everyone. I join Brandon in welcoming you today to today's webinar. I'm so grateful to continue support in Indian country. The last 15 years has by far been the most inspiring and fulfilling work of my career. I am honored to be part of the team advancing the mission of the Office of Indian Energy for the benefit of American Indians and Alaska Natives. This webinar series is sponsored by the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs, otherwise referred to as the Office of Indian Energy. This year's webinar series is titled Tribes Leading the Way in the clean energy transition. Great strides have been made in recent years to help provide greater financial support and foster relationships between federal agencies and tribal governments. The most recent examples are the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BILL, Inflation Reduction Act, otherwise known as IRA, and more recently, the Presidential Executive Order on reforming federal funding to support for tribal nations, and the U.S. DOE Secretary reaffirming commitment to buy tribal energy. Last year's Tribal Energy webinar series focused on the unprecedented amount of funding going toward climate change solutions through landmark legislation such as BILL and IRA, and now tribes can participate in, and how tribes can participate in the clean energy transition. This year's webinar series will continue to provide information on funding and financing while also providing case studies of how tribes are leading the way. Additionally, the 2024 series will include information on tools, resources, and funding and financing opportunities to help you participate in the clean energy transition. We hope this webinar and this series as a whole is useful to you. We also welcome your feedback. So please let us know if there are ways we can make the series better. You can send feedback to our main email at indianenergy@hq.doe.gov or add them to the question box in the webinar control panel. Before we move on to the other presenters, I want to provide some information on the Office of Indian Energy and highlight a few funding opportunities and resources. Before we jump into it, I also want to introduce you to the Office of Indian Energy team. Wahala Johns is the director of the Office of Indian Energy. She is a member of the Navajo Dene tribe and comes from northeastern Arizona. Her background is in renewable energy and community organizing, having co-founded the Native Renewables, a nonprofit that builds renewable energy tribal capacity while addressing energy access. Her work with the Black Mesa Water Coalition and Navajo Green Energy Economy Coalition led to groundbreaking legislative victories for groundwater protection, green jobs, and environmental justice. In 2019, she was awarded the Nathan Cummings Foundation Fellowship. Under under her tenure, the Office of Indian Energy's budget has more than tripled from $22 million in fiscal year 2021 to $75 million in fiscal year 2023. This growth provides additional funding to support tribal communities in pursuing their energy sovereignty and energy goals, and includes 30 staff positions in the office to assist in reaching your energy goals. Additionally, David F. Conrad, a citizen of the Osage Nation, serves as the Deputy Director for the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs. He recently served as the Director of the Office of Public Affairs for the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs in the Department of Interior, managing press relations, digital media, and communications. Previously, he also worked as the Department of Energy's Director for Tribal and Intergovernmental Affairs in the Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs, where he was responsible for intergovernmental affairs with tribal, city, and county governments. Mr. Conrad has 20 years of intergovernmental affairs experience in the tribal and in energy, environmental, economic development, and natural and cultural resources. Next slide, please. And here's a picture taken at the end of August 2023, which includes our leadership shown in the front and our federal staff and contractor support. Additionally, as part of the deployment team, we have 9 contractors who help us execute financial assistance, technical assistance, and education and outreach. The office is currently comprised of over 20 federal employees and contractor support. Members of the team are located in DC, of course, Colorado, Florida, Oregon, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Nevada, and North Carolina, and probably others I've missed. Nevertheless, we are all across the U.S. Next slide, please. As advocated for and by the tribes and incorporated into the Energy Policy Act of 2005, the Office of Indian Energy was stood up in 2011 as one of about a dozen assistant secretarial level offices within the department. The office, authorized under the Energy Policy Act, or EPACT, of 2005, is charged by Congress to, number 1, promote Indian energy development, efficiency, and use. Number 2, reduce or stabilize energy costs. Number 3, enhance and strengthen Indian tribal energy and economic infrastructure relating to natural resource development and electrification. And number 4, to bring electrical power and service to Indian land and the homes of tribal members located on Indian lands or acquired, constructed, or improved in whole or in part with federal funds. To aid us in accomplishing our mission, the office receives insights from the Indian Country Energy and Infrastructure Working Group, otherwise known as ICWIG, on issues affecting energy and infrastructure development. On the right side of the slide, you'll see a few examples of co-funded projects that have been successfully completed. Next slide, please. Now more about the deployment program. To provide this assistance, our deployment program partners with Indian tribes, including Alaska Native regional and village corporations and tribal organizations, to overcome the barriers to clean energy development. Our deployment program is comprised of a 3-pronged approach, consisting of financial assistance, technical assistance, and education and capacity building. This Tribal Energy webinar series is just one example of our education and capacity building efforts. Next slide, please. Last year, the office committed $72 million to 21 tribal clean energy projects across the country, which builds on investments of over $120 million in more than 200 tribal energy projects across the contiguous 48 states and Alaska, valued at over $215 million. Through these grants, the Office of Indian Energy continues its efforts in partnership with Native communities to maximize the deployment of clean energy solutions for the benefit of American Indians and Alaska Natives. Specifically, those projects have resulted in tangible benefits for over 100 American Indian and Alaska Native communities, including nearly 46 megawatts of new generation installed, nearly 13 megawatt hours of battery storage installed, over $14.4 million saved every year, nearly $315 million saved over system lifetimes, $3.38 saved for every DOE dollar invested, and nearly 8,800 tribal buildings affected. By the way, this slide shows our tribal energy projects database on our website, which offers an interactive map along with a sortable table. You can get project summaries, presentations, and if completed, final reports on each of the projects that we've completed. Next slide, please. Since 2009, our office has made 18 funding opportunity announcements. Of the nearly 690 applications accepted between 2010 and 2022, the Office of Indian Energy has funded over 302, or 32% of all applications received, which I believe is actually a pretty high percentage, especially considering the average for DOE is estimated between 5 and 10% of all applications. It's worth noting that our funding opportunities are competitive, and for the deployment grants, the projects are intended to be shovel ready. Next slide, please. The office currently has one open funding opportunity announcement for intertribal organization support for tribal clean energy, communication, and engagement. And we anticipate the release of 2 more funding opportunity announcements in the coming weeks. The intertribal organization support for clean energy, communication, and engagement funding opportunity is focused on enhancing outreach and engagement to improve federally recognized tribes' navigation and access to DOE clean energy funding and technical assistance. Applications are due September 24th and will provide up to $300,000 annually for 3 years for 4 eligible regional nonprofit intertribal organizations. I won't go into too much detail, as you will hear more shortly from the project officer, Carrie Nelson, who is overseeing this funding opportunity. Next slide, please. More recently, we issued 2 notices of intent to release a combined $30 million in funding opportunity announcements later this summer, or fall, I guess as the case may be. The first notice of intent, seen here, will support tribal clean energy planning and development, where we anticipate making approximately $25 million available with awards that range from $100,000 to $2.5 million, depending on the area of interest. It is anticipated a 10% cost share will be required under this planned FOA. However, cost share reduction from 10% to 0 can be requested as part of the application, with the reduction based on financial need. You can read more about this notice of intent on the IE Exchange, which Brandon will kindly drop the link in the control panel chat box. Thanks, Brandon. Next slide, please. The second notice of intent will support tribal colleges and universities planning to transition to clean energy, where we anticipate making approximately $5 million available with awards that range from $100,000 to $250,000 for planning grants. It is anticipated that no recipient cost share will be required under this planned FOA. For tribal colleges and universities eligibility and definitions, again, please see the notice of intent for greater details on IE Exchange. Next slide, please. Further, you can access tribal energy related opportunities offered through the DOE and other agencies on our current funding opportunities page, and download the funding flyer shown here, which is updated weekly. Next slide, please. As of August 30th, this is a summary of the funding opportunities listed when you go to our website and download the weekly funding flyer. I won't go into detail here, but you can obtain more information on our current funding opportunities page. Highlighted in yellow are either the new or approaching deadlines. Next slide, please. This is additional funding opportunities that you can see on the flyer. Next slide. In addition to the Office of Indian Energy funding opportunity announcements, I wanted to bring to your attention a few other resources. The DOE Office of Indian Energy current funding opportunities page, which includes tribal energy specific opportunities through the Office of Indian Energy, DOE, and other federal agencies. You can also receive information on funding opportunities by subscribing to our email newsletter and accessing the weekly funding flyer, which we just saw, either online or through the email newsletter. Number 2, the Clean Energy Infrastructure Program and funding opportunities, which identifies the opportunities for the $97 billion through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And number 3, and a more general web page with possible funding opportunities across the government, the Energy Communities Funding Opportunities page, including information on competitive opportunities, tax credits, state-based funding, and a funding clearinghouse, which can be sorted by eligible recipient to see what opportunities may be applicable to you. This is also a wonderful resource. Next slide, please. Recently, the office announced the save the date and registration for the 2024 annual program review. Join us the week of November 18th at the Renaissance Denver Central Park Hotel. This annual event is an opportunity for tribal leaders and staff to meet, learn from other tribes that are pursuing clean energy projects, and share each other's successes. The 2024 program review is open to all of Indian country and will feature project updates from tribes across the nation who are leveraging Office of Indian Energy grant funding to deploy clean energy technology. For more detailed information, see the 2024 Office of Indian Energy Program Review webpage on our website. Brandon will drop the link for that page into the chat for everyone's convenience. Next slide, please. Thank you again for your time and attention today. You can reach us on our main help desk phone number or email included on the slide. Please reach out if you have questions or need assistance. We can help direct you to resources through our office across the department and other agencies. You can also join us on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, which is X, I guess, and Facebook at DOE Indian Energy. Before I turn the floor back to Brandon, I wanted to personally thank the presenters for giving their time in preparing for and presenting in today's webinar. Thank you. And with that, the virtual floor is yours, Brandon.
Thanks, Jamie. Before we get started with the remaining presentations, first I want to introduce you to the other presenters on today's webinar. We just heard from Jamie, and our next speaker is Carrie Nelson, who serves as a project officer working with intertribal organizations to support tribal communication and engagement for clean energy. The work she does with intertribal organizations is focused on enhancing outreach and engagement to improve federally recognized tribes' navigation access to U.S. Department of Energy's clean energy funding and technical assistance. Before joining the Office of Indian Energy, Carrie managed a low-income energy efficiency grant program and also served as a tribal account executive for the Bonneville Power Administration. And most recently was a policy analyst for the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Policy, working on state, local, tribal, and territorial policy. Carrie received a Bachelor of Science at the University of Oregon, a Master of Science from Milano School of Policy at the New School University in New York, and a certificate in tribal government relations at Portland State University Institute for Tribal Government. Following Carrie's presentation, we will hear from both Daniel Wiggins and Michael Troji, who are both with the Midwest Tribal Energy Resources Association, also known as MTERA. Daniel Wiggins is a Bad River tribal member and MTERA's new executive director. He has worked in energy for nearly a decade, specifically working for the Bad River tribe as the energy coordinator and the Moshkizibi Natural Resource Department deputy director. Daniel has assisted the tribe with strategic planning, development, and execution of energy projects. This includes policy development, but also planning, development, and execution of microgrids, group solar installs, and other clean energy projects. His focus is now working with all the Midwest tribes under MTERA's vision to empower tribes to manage tribal energy resources through collective action. Michael Troji has been with Oneida Nation since 1995. His initial responsibilities were as a watershed specialist focusing on land, soil, and water conservation issues. Around 2005, Mike started the transition to energy conservation and clean energy planning. He has been affiliated with MTERA as a board member since 2014. Mike received his master's in sustainable management from University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. And finally, we will hear from Dave Messier, who serves as the Infrastructure Division Director for the Tanana Chiefs Conference, otherwise known as TCC, a nonprofit intertribal consortium serving the needs of 37 federally recognized tribes across interior Alaska. Dave has been working on rural energy needs in bush communities since 2009 and currently oversees TCC's $180 million effort to support energy, broadband, and housing across the region. Dave holds a Bachelor of Science from Cornell University and an MBA from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. He also serves as a board member on the Golden Valley Electric Association Board of Directors and owns Daylight Energy Services, an energy consulting company that has led the design of multiple solar diesel battery systems across Alaska. Dave lives and works in Fairbanks, Alaska. Thank you to each of our presenters for making the time to join us today. And as a reminder, please feel free to submit a question at any time by clicking on the question button located at the webinar control panel on your screen and type in your question. We will answer your written questions at the end of today's final presentation. And with that, let's get started with our next presentation. Carrie, you may proceed once your slides are up.
Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us today. As mentioned, my name is Carrie Nelson, and as the project officer for this intertribal organization opportunity, I am so happy to be here today and to share this information with you all. Next slide, please. So first I'll start with an overview, which Jamie started on earlier, and I'll just give you some more details. The purpose of this opportunity is to help federally recognized tribes gain better access to DOE's funding for clean energy and technical assistance. As a pilot program, the Office of Indian Energy will award up to $3.6 million to increase collaboration with up to 4 nonprofit regional intertribal organizations. Eligible organizations may apply for up to $300,000 annually for up to 3 years. This funding is intended to support communication, internal organizational capacity building, and engagement activities for the selected intertribal organizations. The goal is to build long-lasting, effective working relationships between tribal elected leaders and staff. Selected intertribal organizations will coordinate, collaborate, and partner with the Office of Indian Energy to help amplify DOE messaging, communicate about funding opportunities, and improve government-to-government engagement opportunities. All of this is with the goal of meeting DOE's general tribal trust responsibility and to build long-lasting and effective working relationships with Native American elected leaders and key staff. Next slide, please. So really quick, before I dive in any further, I want to share a little bit about EnergyWorks, which was established last year as part of a partnership intermediary agreement, which is also known and often referred to as a PIA, that is with DOE. EnergyWorks is essentially an energy innovation hub that is able to act as a facilitator for various opportunities that come out of DOE, such as this one that I will be sharing about today. Next slide, please. EnergyWorks does extensive outreach, trying to expand the energy ecosystem so that everyone can benefit from DOE's opportunities. EnergyWorks is able to move quickly on opportunities, serving as a platform to broaden DOE's engagement and collaboration. The idea of this PIA is to streamline the hurdles seen by small organizations, organizations that are new to working with the government, or organizations that have historically experienced barriers to participating in DOE programs. These opportunities are not FOAs. They are generally more simplified, including the application process is more simplified. Once organizations are awarded, they will enter into a business-to-business agreement with EnergyWorks, which is also more streamlined than other contracting mechanisms that you may be familiar with. Next slide, please. And then here are just the many ways to access information about this opportunity through EnergyWorks information channels, including the upcoming office hours and the application deadline. But I also have a slide about this later on in the presentation that I can go over. And next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of the EnergyWorks webpage where you can find all the necessary resources for applying for this opportunity, including recordings of a webinar that is very similar to this one that we did with EnergyWorks that has much of the same information. And there's also webinar resources over in that black box to the left, which also includes the link to the application, the templates that can be used for the application, and other resources. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll start with eligibility criteria. In order to be eligible to apply for this opportunity, an organization must be a coalition of 2 or more federally recognized Indian tribes, be established under congressional, state, or tribal law, and be governed by board members who are current elected tribal government officials. The organization must act at the direction of their member Indian tribes within a specific geographic region, and they must qualify as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Eligible organizations must have a focus beyond public health and gaming. I should also mention here that since the application is currently open to the public, we are still within that application window and we are unable to answer any specific questions about eligibility or to make any eligibility criteria changes during this phase of the pilot. Next slide, please. Okay, here I will go over a few examples of the types of activities an organization should support and implement if selected for this funding. In this role, an intertribal organization will track and disseminate DOE funding and other opportunities to member tribal governments. This will be done in collaboration with DOE and specifically myself as the project officer in the Office of Indian Energy. Together, we will establish a plan so that we can connect on a regular basis and ensure member tribes are up to date on clean energy related projects and opportunities. As part of this, you will assist your member tribes in identifying their clean energy needs, and together we will connect them to the relevant DOE program offices. With DOE support, your organization will create opportunities for dialogue among tribes, the energy community, and DOE. This may include organizing conferences, workshops, distributing electronic newsletters, websites, emails, printed materials, and other methods that work best for your organization, and other events to support tribal collaboration and communication. Your organization may also increase and enhance engagement between DOE and tribes by organizing regular opportunities for DOE representatives to communicate DOE energy program information in ways that you determine is the most valuable format for your member communities. Next slide, please. As another part of this opportunity, the Office of Indian Energy anticipates that selected organizations may choose to assign a tribal energy liaison that has been approved by your board. The tribal energy liaison will be expected to implement education and outreach efforts equitably across your organization's member tribes. The liaison will also have a coordinating role for DOE engagement and communication activities with your member tribal governments by providing regular meetings for DOE leadership and staff to communicate agency-wide energy policy and program information and opportunities. Some more things the liaison will do. The liaison will track and disseminate DOE messaging and support the development of a work plan to communicate funding opportunities, technical assistance opportunities, and associated timelines with your member tribal governments. The liaison will support the work at conferences, workshops, events, as mentioned, possibly small group briefings, and support more tribal collaboration. In addition to events, the liaison may also assess tribal interest in DOE-related topics and provide a forum to equitably share information across the interest via methods mentioned in the previous slide and including electronic newsletters, the website emails, as I mentioned before. Another example of this may be to reserve time during conventions or other meetings held by your organization for Office of Indian Energy leadership and other key staff to present about energy policies, programs, and updates. As part of all this, the liaison will work with the Office of Indian Energy to collectively agree on information to be disseminated to member tribal governments via any of these means that I've mentioned. Next slide. So as part of the application, applicants are required to submit a work plan. The work plan must not be more than 5 pages, and if the work plan exceeds the maximum page length, DOE will review only the authorized number of pages and disregard any additional pages. The work plan must be submitted in a Microsoft Word format. There is a template, and the use of the work plan template is not required. However, we do encourage it, and the information indicated within the template is required. So in other words, if you don't choose to use the templates, make sure to include the information requested in that template. And that is available for download on the EnergyWorks site on that page that I showed a screenshot of. And I also have a QR code coming up for that on an upcoming slide. The work plan must also address the review criteria included in the announcement, and this will be how you're scored by the panel, the review panel. I'm also going to go over that review criteria in just another slide. The work plan should describe the work to be accomplished and how the applicant will achieve milestones, final project goals, and produce all deliverables. And again, these guidelines you can find in the work plan template. In the work plan, please do not include dollar amount or specific dates in the work plan, only general timeframes. Next slide. Okay, so here's the review criteria. So this slide lists what should be included in your application and work plan. And this criteria will be used to evaluate your application by the panel. And this is also listed on that EnergyWorks webpage. Getting a little bit more into the details, there should be a section for goals and objectives, including your mission of your organization and a concise description of your proposed work under this opportunity. Within that application, it is often referred to as a project. It should also demonstrate how the proposed goals and objectives align with your member tribe's priorities. It should include a project description and the proposed outcomes, and should provide clarity for the project, for clarity for all the anticipated outcomes, and the relevance to the proposed goals and the objectives in the opportunity. And it should demonstrate how the proposed methodology will ensure equitable outreach and coordination across your member tribes. It should also include information about your project management approach, such as a clear description of organizational and individual roles and responsibilities, the capabilities of your organization, but also any other project participants that are needed to address all aspects of your proposed project. And it should also include a plan to overcome barriers and obstacles. And then, as I mentioned before, that work plan is required. And again, in that template, it'll explain this, but it should just include a real clear description, breakdown of proposed activities, schedule, deliverables, and a logical task structure, those milestones associated with that, and budget proposal. And the template includes more detailed information on the budget proposal as well. And I will go over into the budget, I think, in the next slide, so I'll move on. Yes, there it is. Okay, so at the top of this slide, there is a screenshot of the budget template. It's not required, but encouraged, and definitely review that information in there to see what should be included. The fields align with the work plan requirements, which include the milestones and those related tasks. And this template is also found on that EnergyWorks website opportunity page under downloadable files and under quick links. So at the bottom half of this slide, you see there's a screenshot on how to locate it. You click on the quick links, and then it'll take you both to the budget and work plan template. And then there's also a QR code there to get you to this opportunity page. Okay, next slide. And this is basically the same slide, but it's a screenshot for how to get to that work plan located right next to that budget template. And then that text on the left in the orange gives you an idea of the order that will be inside that work plan template. So we've got the milestones, the tasks, the details of the tasks, and the task deliverables. And that's the same QR code to get there. And then next slide, please. So we had a couple of these dates at the beginning of the presentation too, but I wanted to make sure to get it in front of everyone here. We have the office hours coming up, which will include a presentation very similar to this, but then a Q&A session, and that is on September 17th on a Thursday. So, you know, if you start working on your applications and new questions come up, please feel free to check in with us then, but you can also at any time reach out to EnergyWorks and email questions directly to them, and they will respond promptly. And then just please make note that the application deadline is next month on September 24th, and it is by 3 p.m. in the afternoon. I know that other opportunities do different times. So please make note to get that in there by 3 p.m. ET, Eastern Time. And with that, I believe I'm done with my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Carrie. And we'll get to some of these questions at the very end of the webinar today, but thank you again. Next, we have MTERA presenting. And I believe, Michael, you're going to go first. Michael Troji?
That's correct.
All right, you may proceed once your slides are up.
All right, thank you. And thanks to everybody for joining us. Shigoli, my name is Mike Troji. I'm with Oneida Nation, staff member there for many years, and joined by Daniel Wiggins. He's executive director and a Bad River member and newly elected executive director, might I add. So congratulations to him. Next slide, please. So MTERA's mission to empower Midwest tribes to manage their energy resources through collective action. A fairly short and sweet mission. I think that was developed back in 2018 and just includes a number of photos from across the Midwest that we've been very connected with as far as our member tribes are concerned. So lots of projects going on. And I didn't mean to mention that I hope that this presentation will provide enough of the challenges, successes, and other experiences that MTERA has seen over the last few years, and how the Department of Energy grant did basically start it all off. So we appreciate everything that Office of Indian Energy has provided to MTERA. Next slide, please. Seek to unlock the benefits of both tribal sovereignty and collective action, collective strength. So certainly tribal sovereignty and working with individual member tribes was probably a premier goal for MTERA in the beginning, just because individual tribes, there were a range of abilities and understandings around their energy usage. So we wanted to make sure that individual tribes were in a position to really capitalize on their energy opportunities, but also understanding later that collective strength certainly goes a long ways as well. So I think we have a pretty strong organization at this point in time. We've got several member tribes that have joined the cause, and we appreciate each and every one of them. And hopefully we can continue making some strides. Next slide, please. So MTERA formed in 2016. A little debatable as far as that date is concerned. I'll get into that later. This is a 501c3 nonprofit. Member tribes are part of the EPA Region 5. In 2016, we started at 5 members. We're currently at 26 members. So being an original member tribe of MTERA, it's I'm amazed and gratified at the same time the kind of growth that the organization has seen. Certainly like to see the tribal energy champions that are participating in the on the board, and that they are supported by their councils. We have a number of members, ranging from different across all kinds of career paths and goals. Some are energy professionals, others are environmental professionals, and just a variety of participation on the board, which I think is a strength. We're able to see a diverse range of opinions when it comes to various decisions that and initiatives that MTERA proceeds with. So next slide, please. Again, we have 26 member tribes ranging across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I believe there are 36 tribes within the Midwest, so we are certainly keen on making contact with those remaining tribes and try to encourage them. as Daniel will explain later, that's not getting in the way of their participation in various programs like Solar for All. So I don't want to steal any of Daniel's thunder, but Solar for All will be accessible by all tribes within the Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan region. Next slide, please. I like to say that MTERA got started in 2014. I was actually approached by Bruno Zager and Brian Van Stippen from Fond du Lac and Ho Chunk back in early 14 or maybe late 13, talking about a need for an organization of some sort that can help essentially spread the word, the kind of information that our particular tribes were receiving from Department of Energy wasn't being received by all, and I guess we're certainly keen on the idea that all tribes should have equal opportunity, equal participation to be able to take advantage of a lot of the Department of Energy programs, as well as the other tools that are available across the federal, state, and private sections. So that was one of the driving forces for putting the organization together. We met following a 2014 Heating the Midwest conference. So Heating the Midwest, some of you may be aware of that organization. Is essentially an organization to promote bioenergy usage in northern Wisconsin and Minnesota, and across other parts of the country. I think there's a Heating the Northeast and a number of organizations across the country that have the same type of vision. But after that meeting, we hosted a number of tribes to essentially initiate the Midwest Tribal Energy Resource Association, and it was fairly well attended at that point in time. The next couple of years were pretty lean, and tried to meet monthly or when we could pull tribes together. So it was challenging to keep things rolling along there for a while, but the word was spreading. And then in 2016, the FOA, the funding opportunity announcement came out. FOA 1453 established a Midwest Intertribal Technical Assistance Energy Providers Network, and we jumped on the chance. We were joined by Forest County Potawatomi community as an author of the application, and submitted it in April. And I put the April date on there only because I'm amazed that we were able to pull together something in a 2 months time. But we did, and we were successful. So next slide, please. And then prior to that, we did put some thought on paper as far as a working mission and objectives were concerned, and a working vision. This document here was actually one of our first brochures to help us advertise the organization. Working mission to bring energy opportunity in Midwest tribes to Midwest tribes that advances energy policy and development by leveraging resources, sharing information, gaining experience, identifying opportunities, and benefiting from real-world projects. Obviously, today's mission is a lot easier to remember, but certainly what we are trying to achieve here is essentially summarized in that statement right there. I think we've done a pretty good job. You can see the objectives. A lot of it was around information and education, making sure that tribes had access to a lot of that stuff. MTERA was intending to provide liaison type of a presence between federal agencies and individual tribes, and helping them create comprehensive energy policy, supporting other types of activities when it comes to energy projects, including planning, financing, procurement. And I think training and apprenticeships, I think we're slowly starting to get our wheels spinning in that realm as well. Next slide, please. I went back to actually some of the original application information, and some of the comments were relatively interesting. MTERA aims to empower tribal governments to implement energy strategies that promote a clean, responsible, sustainable, and sovereign energy future. We knew at the as an organization at that time, this is 14, 15, 16, that we didn't have a real strong presence. Certainly, our name was just getting out the door and slowly being introduced to folks. So we needed something to put us on the map, essentially. And the grant did help us to do that. Sovereign energy was essentially the overarching vision. We really paid a lot of attention to the importation of energy that all the tribes are really subject to, and how importation and sovereignty don't really go hand in hand with each other very well. Strategic energy planning and energy baseline was a big part of that effort, and gaining greater access to various federal tools was an important part of this as well. So building the organization, providing technical assistance, recommending strategies, and liaison work was essentially a lot of the stuff that we were trying to achieve. I think we've done a fairly decent job of that, and these last couple of years have been a whirlwind, and Daniel will take it from here to tell you all about it. Thank you. Next slide.
Next slide. I appreciate it, Mike. And, thank you for the great introduction into MTERA and kind of what has gotten us really to this point and stage of MTERA now. So what is MTERA doing now? As Mike mentioned, I am the new executive director. My name is Daniel Wiggins. Wabe Beneshe, Indigenous Cause, Mukwadodim, Mushkazibi, and Dun Jaba. I'm a Bad River tribal member, coming from the Bad River Energy Program. And so I was in energy for about a decade before coming into the role for MTERA Executive Director. So excited about I was excited about Bad River becoming a member, but then I'm now excited to kind of be assisting tribes, leading MTERA forward and in this new day and age, really with new and exciting projects. Next slide. So MTERA program and objectives. This doesn't cover everything, but this is going to highlight probably what MTERA is kind of getting a lot of PR for. And really, to some of the initiatives, I would say to Mike, what Mike really established was how the DOE grant really set the base for MTERA. It really allowed MTERA to provide to gain a structure and to really start implementing resources to tribes, and also gathering a lot of data. So what do tribes need? What are their goals? What are their objectives? Again, they're running on tribal sovereignty. We want to make sure that we're respectful of that, but we also want to make sure that we're creating access to a lot of these resources. One of the first things MTERA kind of assisted with in kind of a lot of that new funding that was rolling out was the CPRG. US EPA climate pollution reduction grants. If anyone is doing climate change work, they are aware of this funding. They are aware of now PCAPs and CCAPs, and then they are also aware of the implementation fund. So MTERA first led one of the, I would say, like coalitions or consortiums around CPRG, making sure that Midwest tribes were developing a PCAP and a CCAP to take advantage of the implementation funds effectively. States were also allowed the ability to write in tribes, but I feel MTERA kind of had a larger data set with tribes and was able to make sure that our PCAPs and CCAPs were very specific to what the tribes were looking for as far as the implementation funding. And so that was one of the first things we started getting into with the new wave of funding, and then it snowballed. Then we got partnered, and there was two groups within the Midwest, the Blacks and Greens and the UW of Minnesota. We are the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers Program, or what we come to know as the TICTAC. Really kind of continued the efforts I would say we're still kind of fine tuning this program, making sure that all of the partners, including MTERA, is kind of doing their due diligence, making sure that their role is kind of doing what they're supposed to. So I think we're still vamping this up, making sure that it's an effective and efficient resource for tribes, and it really is. So if you're looking for assistance to write grants to kind of help through some of these programs, TICTAC is one of those places, one of those programs you should all be kind of finding in your area. And if not, just reach out to MTERA and we'll help you connect with one of the TICTACs in your region. The next one is Solar for All. And so this is going to be the one, and I have a lot of slides on this. So we'll just get right into the slides. But everyone is aware of Solar for All. That was the big initiative for solar installation, specifically residential solar for tribal communities with MTERA's application. Number of partners, number of contributors to that grant, but very exciting for MTERA and tribes. Community change. This is the game changer from an MTERA perspective with what Mike led with. This is the grant that really puts capacity into tribal's hands. So very excited. We have a little bit more information about that. And then the DOE Tribal Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program. Just another example of how consortiums and with MTERA goals. Next slide. So we got into this a little bit. TICTAC's our US CPA program, working towards a holistic government framework, providing technical assistance and capacity resources to tribes and other municipalities, I'll say that. MTERA is a part of two TICTAC networks in the Midwest, the Black and Greens and the UW University of Minnesota. MTERA supports specifically with funding, direct assistance with planning and development of clean energy projects, objectives, and then a provider network. If we need to bring in other resources to accomplish the task at hand, we're aware that DOE and their application process, especially when you're looking to build microgrids or large solar arrays, they need a lot up front. And so that's where MTERA really tries to help, is making sure that tribes have all of the resources in the beginning when they're doing the application. Outcomes, we do help with decision-making support and specifically to what I said, grant applications. Next slide. Solar for All. I'm gonna hammer these, you guys, so I apologize if I'm going too fast. I'm assuming the slides will be shared, so there'll be plenty of time. And again, reach out if you guys have any other questions to myself or Mike. Solar for All, this was the big one. This was the one I would say that really got us some recognition abroad in Indian country. Primary goal is to deploy as much tribally owned residential and community solar as possible on tribal lands. And so Vanessa Farley is my program manager for Solar for All. She was done a great job with pulling the application together, and now she's doing a great job with implementing the funding. So very excited watching MTERA go through the process and really make sure that tribes are going to be able to take advantage of Solar for All. Related goals, technical assistance, workforce development program, and then mobilize additional capital. Not just grant funding, but we're all aware of tax credits. So how does this work into the scheme which the government was able to provide? A lot of resources, a lot of credits, and just a lot of grant support. So how does that all fit together into one project? MTERA is hoping to kind of mobilize additional capital for some of these tribes to really create larger projects. Next slide. Key principles. It's going to serve all Midwest tribes, to what Mike said. 26 member tribes. Dan's goal, MTERA's goal, is to bring on all 35, now 36 tribes. So we've just bumped up to 36 tribes with Illinois tribe just being recognized. And so we actually have 36 tribes we're going to serve, and we're going to make sure that they all benefit from this funding. It's a tribally led solar planning, so tribes lead their planning development on the ground level, and we respond to what it is their needs are. So it's not us creating the project, it's tribal energy leaders creating the project on the ground and us coming in with the support. Flexible project concepts. We need to make sure that funding is flexible enough so that tribes can, again, fall into an area that works for them. It's not our job to kind of restrict and put them into a corner. It's our job to make sure that they have successful clean energy projects for their tribes and their communities. Tribally owned solar projects, again, now they're just falls right into place. We want to make sure that they want to own them. They're going to own them. And then value from strength in numbers. To what Mike said, it's just benefits to tribes to kind of implement these projects together and then kind of learn from each other as well. Next slide. Next slide. Oops. Can you go back one? So, apologize. Solar for All Coalition. MTERA was the lead applicant. We're going to provide oversight and grant administration, but we can't do this without the number of partners that kind of help contributed to the application and is contributing to the scope of overall success of the program. Grid is coming in to help identify finance, develop and implement residential and the community solar projects specifically. They're going to go over installation basics and training with tribes that want to get into heavy workforce development. We brought in Alliance for Tribal Clean Energy to provide technical assistance and support financial instruments development and engage in some philanthropic network. And then also support MTERA with outreach and communications. Native CDFI, again, we want to make sure that we're bringing in enough capital to help tribes take advantage of tax credits effectively, but also that they're able to kind of make their goals and dreams come true. So Native CDFIs are being built to do exactly that. Wisconsin University of Madison, Wisconsin, again, workforce development, microgrids, solar, all of these technologies come at a cost that we need tribal members trained up. UW-Madison is really helping with the workforce development piece, making sure we're not just creating certificates and installation things on the ground, but that we're actually getting hard curriculum into colleges and other places so that people can get degrees as well. So very cool workforce development also happening. And then Electrical Training Alliance, supporting workforce development by connecting recruits with apprenticeship programs. Next slide. The approximate budget is $62 million for 5 years. $22 million is going into administrative development, financial instrument development, engagement with tribes, states, and philanthropy. $40 million is directly going to tribes, so about 1.15 per tribe. Next slide. Again, the approach. There's a lot to this slide, so I don't want to attempt to decipher the slide. But as you can see, you can kind of see the roles of all of the partners and kind of where they fit in, providing the service to the ground level and to the targeted outcomes. And so the program development and management is really happening with all of the partners, including the tribes. The pre-construction assistance will absolutely be provided to the tribes along with the construction commissioning and O&M support. Next slide. To what Mike said, again, just emphasizing that Solar for All is going to be available to 36 Midwest tribes. And again, the direct financial assistance of up to $1.15 million from MTERA. Potential additional capital if they choose to, pre-construction assistance, project deployment support, support for workforce development. Again, MTERA wants to assist where they need help. If there's a gap, we'll figure out how to put that resource and plug it in. Important notes on timelines. This is a 5-year program. When each tribe can expect to begin working on their project will depend on a range of factors. So going over those policies, those utility restrictions is another role that MTERA is going to help. We're kind of getting ahead of it with tribes. And then we will start having one-on-one meetings with interested tribes as soon as November. Next slide. Solar for All program provides an important growth opportunity for MTERA. And so really triggering myself, but also Vanessa Farley, another program manager underneath her, and then another wave of hires that is really gonna assist MTERA and kind of the initiatives with Solar for All. MTERA's goal is to be an influential face to shape the tribal clean energy landscape to best enable tribal energy sovereignty. And to do that, MTERA needs to make sure that we have the capacity support to give that to tribes. So we're excited about the new wave of hires. We're excited about the growth, and we're looking forward to working with tribes with the additional capacity in place. And so, as you see, organizational changes to support growth, myself, but also Vanessa. Next slide. The next big grant was community change. So another EPA program. Again, this is the game changer. I think when MTERA and Mike, when the guys were sitting into the room, they were talking about how do we address capacity issues for energy leaders. We see tribes are all interested in energy, but how do we get a person on the ground to kind of support individual tribes with all of their goals and initiatives and all their needs that they have to have done for that? Community change does exactly that. It funds a tribal energy champion or leader to lead energy related activities for their tribe and serve on the MTERA board for 3 years for all, again, 36 tribes, and really provides flexibility. So if you have a tribal energy leader and you have mechanisms that you're already using, we are aware that that's not all tribal needs. They're going to need an electrical or maybe an energy technician, a project manager. Within the energy, there is absolutely need for capacity, and we're not trying to limit this as well. So very flexible. We're going to be working with tribes, and again, try to remain as flexible as much for the 36 Midwest tribes. Next slide. Again, just to support the community change, we understand that tribal capacity to lead energy projects is one of the main limiting factors in tribes accessing kind of the wave of funding. And so even I came from Bad River, where we had an energy program, we had somewhat of a full-time energy coordinator. With all of the energy funding that was coming down, there was no way to even kind of sift through it appropriately for each tribe from one person's perspective. And so again, the capacity needs are just there. And when there's gaps, again, that's when MTERA wants to come in and help these tribes on the ground and make sure that they're given each funding announcement their due diligence from their tribal perspectives. Next slide. Community change. So I'm leading right into another program, DOE Tribal Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program. We all love acronyms, so I'll give you another one. Here's kind of this program is formula funded. Many tribes do not have the capacity to support an application or program. If you're aware of the HERE program, it specifically allocated tribes a dollar amount per each tribe. Some of those dollar amounts are absolutely worth tribes' attentions. They can absolutely have the capacity and the need to go after it. Some of those allocations are small enough to where there is an issue with just even going after the funding sometimes. That's where MTERA wants to step in, take a collective approach, and make sure that the tribes are getting what they're supposed to. Community change, the slides that I just presented on, have lead objectives that require or entice tribes, I shouldn't say require, but really promote tribes to figure out how to take advantage of programs such as this. Next slide. Again, everything's connected. So whether it's community change to make solar for all successful, MTERA really feels that community change, funding the capacity for each of the 36 energy leaders, really needs to lead into then solar for all and the implementations of those solar projects. HERE is also integrated with solar for all. So HERE is a great program identifying energy efficiency goals or energy efficiency measures as they're normally called. But MTERA is considering other ways that the two programs can be streamlined for tribes into a single work stream that provides funding, technical assistance, contractor networks, and other types of assistance that tribes may need as they're going through the process. Next slide. So Midwest can shape MTERA program engaging in monthly meetings. And so, you know, to follow up on the programs, MTERA meets on a regular basis to kind of go over everything that I just highlighted. And again, that's just a snapshot. I would say that's the high level. That's the stuff you're seeing probably in the PR and some of the articles, what EPA is posting out. And so those are the programs that we feel really are contributing to the capacity growth within MTERA, but also the recognition of MTERA and MTERA tribes. To keep things moving, to make sure that we're doing our due diligence for tribes, because remember, we are an intertribal organization that is led by tribal energy leaders that are associated with tribal council leadership. And so it's our job to meet monthly for at a minimum of 90 minutes to discuss programs, provide updates on funding opportunities, and just hear about what each tribe's energy work is looking like. To become a member, a tribe does pass a tribal resolution supporting membership and appointing both a tribal energy champion, but also a tribal council leader to sit on MTERA's board. And so again, the champion is really just a proxy. The leader, the tribal leader, is really where we get MTERA credibility, I'll say, as an intertribal organization, and really allows the tribal energy champion to kind of be an effective proxy, I would say, for that tribe. Next slide. Thank you for your time. Again, I know I talk fast and I kind of ran through those slides fairly quickly. MTERA is doing a lot of great work. My staff are really invested in themselves into a lot of this funding that is coming out, but also a lot of the program building. A lot of us are tribal members that have specifically worked for tribes or come from a tribe that has energy goals and objectives. And so we clearly understand kind of some of the obstacles and stuff that tribes face at a ground level. And we're excited to be providing some solutions to some of those issues and some of those problems that tribes are running into. So thank you guys for your time. Look forward to more discussions and feel free to reach out. Miigwech.
Thanks, Dan and Michael. That was really good. Quite the success story there, and just the tremendous growth you all have seen. Next, we have TCC presenting. Dave Messier. When your slides are up, you may proceed.
Thank you, Brandon. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. My name is Dave Messier. I am the TCC the TCC Infrastructure Division Director here at Tanana Chiefs Conference, which is a tribal consortia based in the interior of Alaska. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Intertribal Award that Tanana Chiefs Conference received from the Department of Energy, I think back in 2016, 2017, and kind of the work that it has allowed us to do. The overall project was funded as the Interior Athabascan Energy Capacity Building Network. And from my personal experience, I can recommend to folks, when you're coming up with an acronym, try to keep the acronym away from the term ICBM, because that's what some people have reflected on our acronym. But it was a phenomenal opportunity for Tanana Chiefs Conference to really further our work in the energy field. Next slide. So the region as a whole is fairly remote. It is approximately 235,000 square miles across the Arctic and subarctic region of Alaska, and it can be hard for folks in the lower 48 to kind of contextualize just how remote the region is. It's always fun for me when I go down to conferences and talk to folks or tribe members in California, and they're referencing how remote the community is. And some of our villages, many of our villages, in fact, are what we call fly-in only, so they're only accessible by bush plane or very long snow machine or boat rides. And so to contextualize the region a little bit more, we're roughly 20,000 tribal members in this area, about the size of Texas, outside of the Fairbanks-North Star Borough, which is kind of the hub of the region. We've got less than 10,000 tribal members in this gigantic area that we serve. And many of our communities, everyone with the exception of Tanana, is on a remote diesel-powered microgrid. The community of Tanana is on the larger Alaskan microgrid called the Alaska Rail Belt, which connects electrical generation systems from Fairbanks here in the interior, and you can see that on the map, all the way down to Anchorage and down in the Kenai Peninsula to Homer. But the remainder of our systems are not interconnected to the outside world. None of Alaska is connected to the lower 48, and so all of our other systems are nearly 100% reliant on imported diesel for all of their electric generation, which has caused challenges when it comes to trying to help our communities succeed and thrive. So Tanana Chiefs Conference is an intertribal organization that's been around since 1962. We represent 37 federally recognized tribes. That's about 6% of the federally recognized tribes nationally. And even though our population is fairly small, less than 20,000 tribal members in the region, our percentage of federally recognized tribes is fairly significant. And that's what counts with government-to-government relationships. The overall electric generation, this giant area, if you can imagine, I try to, again, just help paint the picture for folks. These 10,000 or so tribal members spread across our 37 communities is less than 10 megawatts, which is less than the generation or the consumption of the Coors Brewery plant down in Golden, Colorado, if you've ever taken a tour there. So that's one lower 48 commercial structure that consumes more electricity than all of our diesel generators spread across this area the size of Texas if they were on full blast all at once. And most of the time they're probably running at less than half of that. So fairly complicated region to work in, but obviously the reason that TCC exists is to assist our tribes with challenges that they face, whether those are transportation, energy sovereignty, self-governance, etc. And I'll note that the majority of TCC's work is serving as an Indian Health Service IHS provider, although that's not the reason we were founded. That is what occupies a large chunk of our time and kind of organizational energy. Next slide. So the region as a whole, I'm sure many folks in the room were around in the 1970s. So some of our communities at that point were not yet electrified. Large parts of the region were kind of established in the 50s or 60s. This was, interior Alaska, and Alaska in general obviously was settled much later than, settled by the United States and folks that came into the region much later than the lower 48. And so, many of our tribal members' grandparents were more nomadic, traveling from hunting and fishing camps to winter camps and subsisting on caribou and salmon. And so in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, the BIA came in and started to bring those communities together at hunting and fishing camps, predominantly along the river systems. And once they brought them into a single area, they had to provide a school. And to run a school, they needed electricity. And so they were electrified with small diesel generators oftentimes, because diesel is a phenomenally dense resource. And that kind of became the nexus for building out the electrical distribution systems. And it was a little bit haphazard. In some of our region, we have independent utilities that own and operate the electric grid. In some of our region, we've got tribally owned utilities, and the tribe can have a population of less than 150 people, which can make economies of scale very challenging. But suffice to say, this huge area, small population, it is a challenge for many of our communities to maintain sufficiently operating electric utilities. And that kind of became one of the challenges and the reasons that TCC, my organization, was asked to assist with trying to reduce the cost of energy in our region. Next slide. So you can see of all of the remote communities in our region, the vast majority of them were powered exclusively by diesel generators, and that has been predominantly flown or barged into communities, and that provides almost 100% of the electricity use in the community is burned in these diesel generators, very similar to the diesel engines that are on Mack trucks you'll see driving down the interstate. Ours just simply have generator heads attached, and they produce electricity and power a community, but supplying that fuel is both costly and somewhat of a risk for our communities, and it certainly doesn't put them in the driver's seat when it comes to tribal energy sovereignty. And that is the desire of many of our communities, is to take control of their energy future, and you really can't do that when 100% of your energy is imported in the form of diesel that's flown or barged in your community. So this is a historic map of what the state's energy situation looks like. There was a small, somewhat successful, I should say just an early version of a solar array that you can see in a small community called Lime Village, down just above where it says Kenai Soldotna there. And that was a grant funded project back in the 90s that was not quite a success long term. And so for the past 50, 60, 70 years of our villages being electrified, they've basically been dependent 100% on diesel, and our tribes came together collectively through TCC in the early 2000s and said, we need solutions for this. We don't like to be at the whim of the oil man, and we want to figure out ways to reduce our energy costs and take better control of our energy future. And so Tanana Chiefs Conference is sort of the tie that binds in the region. We do not have a larger borough or county government. We have a very large region, and we're the only entity that really ties our tribal governments in that region together, just because of the way the state and the region is structured. So there's no tax base, there's no revenue generating sources aside from Tanana Chiefs Conference, and my position originally was funded about 12 years ago or so off of the indirect rate that we make on some of our health services to provide kind of an energy resource manager for the region, because our tribes were asking for assistance and they had nowhere to point them. Next slide. So 2016, 2017, there was an intertribal opportunity that came out, and my small office at the larger TCC organization applied for it, and we were granted funding for 5 years, which doubled our previous budget, which was less than $200,000 a year, to try to tackle this energy challenge across a region the size of Texas. And we came up with a number of goals to try to improve coordination and collaboration between our very spread out region. And the most important is to reduce the cost of energy in rural Alaska, which is a challenge that far smarter people than I have been grappling with over the last 50 plus years. And there have not been too many successful solutions, because the simple fact is that diesel is an incredibly energy dense resource and it's easy to transport. As a colleague once said, the state of Alaska and the federal government has spent billions of dollars addicting rural Alaska to gallons of diesel, and it's going to take billions of dollars to unaddict them. And we are hoping to make a small dent in that. And to do that, the intertribal group was formed to kind of build capacity in rural communities, and most importantly, to try not to get overwhelmed by the enormity of the challenge. And I can't underscore that enough for folks that have worked with tribal governments and intertribal organizations. It can be a challenge to try to elevate this energy, energy priorities to the forefront of leadership's mind when they have a whole variety of other challenges on their plate, from ensuring that, in a rural community anyway, ensuring that the tribal government is functioning, possibly making sure they've got a water plant operator that shows up to work, village public safety officers, maybe organizing search and rescue issues, dealing with ICWA cases. And so energy, even though it's the underpinning of kind of life in our communities and in many of communities across the country, it can be hard to elevate that to the right level that, in my biased opinion, it needs to be to move the ball down the field and try to reduce energy costs and improve the quality of life, make it easier for people to live there. So many days you show up and you don't know if you're going to be sailing up the wave or getting swallowed up by the wave. But over the last 12 years that the TCC Energy Program has been stood up, I think that we are hopefully cresting the wave and making some good progress, and that is in large part due to the collaboration that we're able to have across the region from the Intertribal Award that the Department of Energy granted to TCC. Next slide. So the IAECPN that was formed, it was initially kind of tasked with trying to solve some of these big issues that plague our region. We have not infrequently power outages, and there's really no entity that can assist or that's set up to assist outside of the state of Alaska and state support for Some of their circuit rider programs has historically been limited at times. And it's important to know this is not a new issue. Our state has been grappling with how best to facilitate energy solutions for rural Alaska for many years. There is an article in the 1988 Rural Light talking about how the state of Alaska seeks to improve utility operations and talking about intertribal, inter-community organizations, cooperatives. That would be a good idea to try to share resources. Well, there wasn't a heck of a lot that happened to promote that goal in the 20 plus years that preceded this article, but it's an important goal to not lose track of, and that's really the crux of what we've been trying to do at Tanana Chiefs Conference and the region. Next slide. And so I'm a big numbers guy, and this is kind of some of our challenges are underscored by just the numbers, right? So these are two columns with fairly similar sized communities. Most of their characteristics seem to be about the same. Usually I start off with this, but in our region, electric costs of over $1 a kilowatt hour are not uncommon right now. Unfortunately, these are actually old numbers. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got communities that are about the same size as those on the right-hand side. But the cost per kilowatt hour is substantially different oftentimes. And what we found after looking at this is the big differentiator between these two columns that are on the screen, which equates to about 30 cents a kilowatt hour, roughly 30%, we'll say, is whether or not the individual tribal community is part of a consortium. The communities on the right are either part of Alaska Village Electric Cooperative or owned by a private village corporation owned utility that manages multiple systems. All of the communities on the left side of the screen all work on their own systems. So their breadth of experience is limited to their remote Alaskan community, and they don't have any consortia involvement outside of TCC's group that we've stood up and we assist them. And this is an old slide. Many of these numbers have improved. The kilowatt hours per gallon, which you can think of as miles per gallon on the highway, have gone up. Line loss, which is just wasted electricity that is not metered, has gone down. And those are all big improvements. Unfortunately, because of the cost of diesel and the cost of just operating a utility, some of the costs per kilowatt hour in those communities are now upwards of $1 a kilowatt hour, which is about 10 times the average in the lower 48. Next slide. So much of our efforts focused on how can we help get our communities from 100% reliant on imported diesel to more sustainable communities, which in our mind is locally produced electricity. And there are a number of different technologies out there that folks will argue are the right fit for remote communities. We have experimented and tried to deploy many of them and kind of settled on large solar battery diesel systems because they're very low maintenance. And that's something that is incredibly important in our rural communities. In general, if you have no moving parts, well, it's harder for things to break, not impossible, obviously. The photo on the left, I'll note, is how the community of Hughes used to get 100% of its diesel, which supplied 100% of the electricity for the community, and kind of to underscore how tenuous the supply chain can be. That photo, the plane that's on the photo there, tail number N3054B, unfortunately went down in a plane crash outside of Fairbanks last fall, and the fuel that it was carrying created a fireball. Folks were lost. These planes that serve many of our villages are DC-6s and DC-4s and have not been built since the 1940s and 50s. So when folks talk about kind of a tenuous supply chain for imported energy and imported electricity, we certainly have that in our communities, and that's the reason our tribal leaders said, hey, we need different solutions, and that's one of the tasks that TCC's energy program has been trying to help solve. So next slide. In order to accomplish that, we really had to start with small grid-tied solar systems and trying to experiment with different technology and kind of act as an aggregator of information when our tribes have questions. Tons of people have thoughts and ideas and information, but very few of them act in the best interest of the tribe. And so TCC kind of early on realized we need to have that expertise that we can guide our tribes on what makes the most sense. And that's the reason, again, that the TCC energy program was stood up and that we were able to go after the initial grant that was kind of really kickstarted the growth of the infrastructure division that I now lead Next slide. So we started with small solar PV systems that were grid tied, and then also did community-wide energy efficiency first in many of our communities, swapping out from compact fluorescent or fluorescent lights to energy efficient LEDs. We've done refrigerator freezer change outs in communities, trying to reduce the overall load in the communities, because the cheapest kilowatt hour is the one that you don't use. Next slide. And kind of what we realized is that it's similar to the Amazon problem, right? Amazon is convenient. You can usually get cheaper products, but man, when you want to go to Walmart to pick something up, it's nice that you can just drive on over there in your community or a local store and grab it off the shelf. But if that local store has kind of all the cheap, easier to supply goods have been cherry picked off by Amazon, then it makes it a lot harder for them to stay in business. And that's kind of what we've realized with the grid tied systems that we've been doing in our communities, is that we're cherry picking the easiest kilowatt hours for individual consumers without being able to benefit the system as a whole. And it is incredibly challenging to try to make the economics of a remote Alaskan powerhouse work just baseline. It's harder to do that when this intertribal organization is coming through and cherry picking off the cheapest, easiest kilowatt hours. Next slide. So we started with a project, or I shouldn't say we started with a project, one of our projects that kind of led us this realization of like, hey, this is where the group needs to be going overall. This is the solution, was a Department of Energy funded project down in Northway, which is one of our tribes down by the Alaska-Canadian border. And we did a very simple, I think this was a 7 kW solar PV system that was originally grid tied. Next slide. And the utility doesn't have, in Northway, it's a small remote microgrid. It doesn't have net metering. There's no requirement that they pay you for the electricity that's sent back onto the grid. They'll take it and absorb it, but you don't get any credit for it. So this is a graph of that system I just had up on the screen. On the left-hand side, you can see all that light green area. The red line kind of represents the load in the building. And we realized is, hey, that light green area, we're just sending off to the grid and not getting any compensation for it. And so fast forward to the slide that says solar with storage, and we had renovated that system and put in a battery system. We changed out some of the inverters, and we were able to store the excess solar production. And so instead of the load being that the community is paying for being everything in red, which is more so on the left-hand side, on the right side, you can see, well, we're producing electricity, the same amount of electricity, but we're storing that in a battery. And then the building, the individual building, is able to use that, and they weren't reliant on the grid until like 2 in the morning for some days during the summer. So we're like, wow, if only we could do that with a remote Alaskan community. Next slide. So based on some of our earlier projects, we started to do just that. Hughes was our first large project on a community size. It is about a population of about 100 people, located about 250 air miles northwest of Fairbanks, Alaska. You need to fly there or take a very long, I think it's probably about 600 to 800 miles worth of a boat trip, or a 200+ mile flight in a bush plane to get over there. And they were previously flying all of their diesel in. So we worked with the tribal chief in that community and implemented a solar project with 120 kW worth of solar, a 357 kilowatt hour battery energy storage system, and then integrated all together and kind of led that, because at the time we put this in, it was the largest in Alaska, and it wasn't quite the first system to go diesels off, but we learned a heck of a lot from this system. You can see in the photo, there's the Hughes powerhouse in the background, and then there's the battery energy storage system, which is that little Quonset hut just behind the solar system. And previously, if that powerhouse wasn't making a big old noise, then your lights in the community of Hughes were off. So next slide, you can see this is a very busy graph, but basically what we started to achieve once we got the system dialed in is that we were able to run the community of Hughes for periods of up to, I think we've hit 14 hours diesels off in that community, which is a huge win for the community of Hughes and tribal energy sovereignty and sustainability in general. And none of that would have really been possible without the collaboration that we were allowed to have, and the additional support from the Department of Energy. But by having funding to hire additional staff and really improve the breadth of services that we're able to offer at TCC to our tribes and get that sort of critical mass. I can 100% say that without the support from DOE's Intertribal Opportunity, we wouldn't be having the success that the Infrastructure Division at Tanana Chiefs Conference has had with our tribes. And I have up on my screen right to the left, which you guys can't see, another system that we just completed in Manly Hot Springs, and it's about 10:30 in the morning up here, and the diesels in that community, very similar to Hughes, just turned off. And so the community of Manly Hot Springs, which I'm monitoring, that just went online this summer, is running, and all of the village load is being met with solar and storage, which is just a huge win for the region. And we're still in many ways in the infancies of the technology, but just the ability to collaborate with all of our tribes, bring folks together and kind of get common visions is something that we wouldn't have had the capacity to handle as a small department without the support the Department of Energy provided. So kind of fast forward to today, next slide, we have a staff of about 10 folks in the Infrastructure Division, and we have taken on, we already had a housing program that's kind of got swept under the Infrastructure Division. We also have a very robust energy program that I would say is a state leader in many ways, and a broadband program, and roughly $180 million worth of funded projects, all aimed at improving the energy systems in our communities and improving broadband access in our communities. Dan had mentioned some of the work that MTERA is doing, just aggregating the home appliance rebate program and making some of these opportunities easier for tribes to access. And you can't do that without staff. And so because we were able to show successes for our communities, our tribes asked for TCC's leadership to put more resources towards the division, and that allowed us to grow. And I'm a big fan of that saying, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And we most certainly had that for the bipartisan infrastructure legislation funding, and we were able to successfully receive a number of different federal grants to benefit our tribal members across the region. And these are large, complex grants that the reality that we've seen in the region is that independently, our tribes just don't have the capacity and kind of the critical mass to go after. And that's always one of our challenges, is making sure that we are augmenting capacity in our community or deepening their bench, and in no way trying to cut them out of going after different opportunities that might benefit their tribal regions. But what we hear the vast majority of the time is that, no, we would love somebody to take this football and run with it, because we are so drained as a small tribal community just trying to survive and keep all of our business operations afloat, or just operations afloat as a tribal government. We just don't have the capacity to learn new things right now that are outside of our wheelhouse. And so the vast majority of our tribes are very excited to have the additional resources that the TCC Infrastructure Division can bring to the table to allow them to improve infrastructure, whether that's energy, housing, or broadband in the region. And again, it just wouldn't be possible without aggregation. And we did not really have that ability to aggregate it until we got additional support from the Department of Energy through this Intertribal Award. Next slide. So where we're at today is we've received about $100 million worth of energy projects or funded work through the region, and we are trying to change that map that I had up earlier, which showed the vast majority of our communities dependent on drops of diesel. We're trying to change that as much as we can, so that we are putting the control and kind of the future of our region's energy supply more so in the hands of our tribal members, who are part of the Tanana Chiefs Conference consortia, and putting in tribally owned solar PV systems and tribally owned battery energy storage systems to manage the load in the community and really generate, at times, 100% of the village's electric load. And that's kind of how we've been able to, or how we're planning on showing reductions in cost and leading towards higher quality of life for our tribal members. There's just been too many benefits to mention, I suppose, that have really come out of the Department of Energy award that we received initially. There was an effort that we had to improve building efficiency standards, because we realized, hey, even though we've got 14,000 heating degree days in our region, there are still entities building with 2x6 walls and R21 installations. So out of that, we realized our tribes were calling for increased efficiency standards, and now the new clinics that TCC builds in our communities are built with R100 insulation values in the ceiling and R70 walls and R50 floors. We've currently got the largest solar array in Alaska's interior under construction. That's hopefully going to be commissioned in the next 2 months. That's not large by the lower 48 standards, but it would be the largest system on the Golden Valley electric grid here in the interior. It's about a 1.2 megawatt system. We're also able to aggregate on behalf of our tribes some of these important grants that wouldn't be possible, not just because of the complexity, but because of the cost share requirement. And because we're a larger organization working at the request of our tribes, we've established a revolving loan fund to allow our tribes to meet the cost share requirements of some of our large federal grants that are opportunities. And TCC is taking the lead in owning the assets that we're building out, and that allows TCC to be eligible for the tax credits that were a result of the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we have about a $5 million revolving loan fund that projects can access to increase the capital for the build on a project. And then TCC takes the lead on requesting reimbursement from the Treasury through that process that's outlined in the Inflation Reduction Act. We're in the process of going through our first one right now, and we've got literally millions of dollars worth of projects on the books that will rely on those tax credits. We're also able to assist our communities with the 40101D funding that's very similar to the home appliance rebate program. That was a formula allocation to improve the energy infrastructure in tribally or in any tribal area. But you know, there's the way that Congress wrote the legislation, it was very clunky for tribes to implement and very complex for them to stay on the right side of the law. And so TCC was able to take the lead on aggregating some of those allocations, and is in the process of working with one of our tribes that we've got an MOU with to manage that in a number of our communities. And we're doing the same thing with our or with the tribal home electrification and appliance rebate program. And then we've also got a large solar for all project that was awarded to TCC, and you know, just stepping in and doing what we can to try to galvanize partners across the state, tribal partners, so that we can make sure that the federal funds that are allocated are really being brought to bear to benefit tribal members in the state of Alaska. And again, just none of that would have been possible without this initial intertribal funding from the Department of Energy that we use to really kickstart our program. And it's been paying dividends for our tribal members, and based on the funding that we've received, it's very much going to change and improve the quality of life for tribal members across the interior of Alaska and across Alaska as a whole, which in my mind is a huge win. And we just really appreciate the Department of Energy for all of their support over the years. And then I've got a last slide, and that about wraps me up. Thank you guys for the opportunity to talk.
Thanks, Dave. Man, there's some great success stories from both MTERA and TCC. I got several questions here. I'll just start with the last speaker here, Dave. Do you find it challenging to convince villages in your region? And by the way, I loved your perspective on the geographical distribution. You really put it in perspective about the size of area you're working with and the challenges with that. But do you find it convincing when you go to many of these communities to that it's hard to convince them that solar works in Alaska?
100% no, and that has certainly been. I'll note there's two things, right? Success breeds more success, and I think the messenger is really important, and the longevity of that messenger is incredibly important. So many of our tribes have seen folks from different agencies kind of come and go over their, you know, lifetimes in a community, and having somebody that is employed by an intertribal consortia that is set up exclusively to benefit their tribal entity, that's pretty meaningful. So the source of the message is really important. And then also being able to point to successes. That's one of the reasons we kind of started small. In that Hughes project that I mentioned, we weren't going out trying to sell other communities on this system until we had really good data that, hey, this works. It's not just a crackpot idea. Here are the actual numbers for the benefit that it can provide your community. And if you want to come and see a rural Alaskan powerhouse and a community running all of its power needs off of solar and batteries, come on over to Hughes. Until we could say that, we weren't, completely confident ourselves, because there's folks in the, across the state that are telling us, oh, you should just be investing in more diesel infrastructure, and that's the only solution. And we know that's not the solution for our tribes. But it's, for years I presented with a representative from the Alaska Energy Authority, and it was like, I would go up and say, hey, here are all the benefits of solar. And then he would follow me and say, yeah, but it doesn't work. And so you've just got these different perspectives, and until you've got successful projects, it's hard to really elevate the message. But now that we have these, successful projects, it's pretty darn hard to say solar doesn't work. We get more solar in the interior of Alaska than Germany does. And you can argue that we've got a more tenuous supply chain on our energy resources. But Germany's got the most installed solar per capita, or at least it did, in the world. And we have, I would argue, a more tenuous supply on our energy supply. So there's definitely the proof's in the pudding, so to speak, and those conversations can be challenging to have.
Yeah, great. So you did talk some about energy efficiency and solar plus diesel. Are there other technologies that you're using up there besides just these solar plus diesel systems? Are you finding that that's mostly what you're using is solar plus diesel and battery? Have you done any wind up there?
There are, that's one of the challenges, is there's so many different opportunities and so many different people that have the right solution. It's just sitting on their shelf for this community, and man, you're paying $1 a kilowatt hour. Boy, my solution will work for you. And sifting through all of the noise, if you will, that can be a full-time job, quite frankly. And so there are certainly wind systems that work in our region, in the interior. There's not a lot of wind resource that's above a class 3. Most of our stuff is like class 1 maybe, and then it's a few miles from the village, and transmission can be $1 million a mile. And then you've got rotating blades and kinetic energy that has to go somewhere. So as an example, AVEC, Alaska Village Electric Cooperative, they have been the statewide leaders in installing wind systems, and they hadn't gone diesels off on one of their wind systems until a system that I was actually a part of installing just a few months ago. We commissioned it down in Stebbins, because there was just a number of complexities and they needed that battery energy storage. So it's really, we could spend a heck of a lot of time looking at hydrokinetics and wind and all these other resources. What we found is that solar works. We can set it up predominantly with local labor. It's a known quantity. There's NREL tools that we can monitor and measure the resource that's available, and it'll work for a long time with minimal impact. And all those things are pretty important, because we don't have an energy problem that's 5 years out. We have a problem now that's forcing folks to move into Fairbanks and Anchorage, where there's cheaper energy prices, and solar and storage is something that we can do now, that we've got a good track record on, that's a proven technology and that we're confident in, and that's really what has to win the day in our mind.
One thing I heard from both MTERA and you is that you are assisting with the ITC. And this is the last question for you, Dave, but this sounds very innovative to me. I hadn't heard of this, but you mentioned an ITC revolving fund, and that sounded very innovative to me. And can you describe how that works a little bit more, and if that was a TCC initiative, and are other intertribal organizations doing something like that?
I can't speak to how other intertribal organizations are operating or assisting their communities, but I know that for TCC, as anybody who's been in tribal energy for a while is probably aware, it's been super frustrating to watch most of the major renewable projects come online and being able to utilize those tax credits. And then as a tribe or an intertribal organization or nonprofit, you can't use that 30% federal tax credit, which is kind of the underpinning of almost all large renewable projects in the country. So with the changes in the Inflation Reduction Act, we were like, holy cow, this is going to open up a whole new world for us. Now we have access to those tools. We need to make sure internally that we're providing the path of least resistance to allow our tribes to get the full benefit. Because, right, you can have all these great federal benefits and programs, but if they're not accessible to tribes, then, well, what the heck's the point at the end of the day? So TCC's leadership was, I would say, really very forward thinking. And again, it was a perfect time because we had these success stories that we had implemented. And so we explained the mechanics of the system and how the ITC would work and the different tranches of benefit that you could get, and how for most of our tribes it was going to be unobtainium, essentially, because they would have to take out a loan and pledge any future revenue towards it and say, hey, we'll pay it back. And that's just a stumbling block for many of our small remote tribes that would have excluded them from being able to take advantage of the ITC. So what we did was we established a $5 million revolving loan fund through revenue that TCC had sitting in the bank, and TCC projects have to be owned by the organization, or we'll do loans to tribes that want to take advantage of it, and they would do a short-term loan through TCC, or if it's a TCC funded project, we would do a loan essentially through the revolving loan fund, put the system in service, start producing kilowatt hours of electricity, and then TCC, because it owns the system, would file the paperwork and refund the revolving loan fund. And that's going to very much open up additional capital and make the systems larger, and most importantly, cover the cost share in some of our large DOE awards that's required. So I very much recommend it. There's certainly different ways to skin the cat as far as giving tribes access to the benefits of the ITC, but for us, it's been a really incredible tool, and we're just super excited that the leadership, the executive board at Tanana Chiefs Conference, has given us their trust and kind of opening up this tool for our tribes to utilize.
All right. Thanks for explaining that, Dave. Great. And let me segue to MTERA. It's kind of the same question. You mentioned how MTERA is also helping with ITC incentives, and it's just a more effective way to, when you can pull all the tribes together, it seems like a more impactful way of doing things. Can you talk a little bit more how MTERA is assisting with that?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's a great question. And to what Dave suggested, I think, each tribe is going to probably relatively have their own approach, or their own identified approach. I love TCC's approach with the revolving loan, because I will say that's absolutely one of the avenues that MTERA is investigating, is how do you get in front of the issues is going to arise for tribes. And one is, how do you take advantage of tax credits when you don't have the capital up front to do it? And so MTERA has identified that as an immediate red flag, and something that we need to kind of do what TCC just suggested. I literally just messaged my team and said, TCC has a revolving $5 million loan addressing tax credits. Let's think about this. And so there is so many opportunities with how the federal government rolled out those tax credits. And to be honest, it created more opportunities and pathways for tribes to take advantage of it, but it creates, I think, more of a need for organizations like TCC and MTERA to make sure that we're vetting these processes for the tribes, to make sure that they're effective for what the tribes want. There's so many ways in the past that you could take advantage of those tax credits, whether you bring in investors or you upfront the money yourself. And those, I would say, opportunities still are available. And so we don't want to take things off the table if it was working for certain tribes as well. And so those investor type models, I think it's going to come with kind of a mixed bag, to be honest, to answer your question simply. And MTERA is kind of approaching it like that. We have to serve 36 tribes, which are going to come with 36 different portfolios and likely 36 different ways of doing things, and that's including investing into their projects. So love TCC's revolving loan. Going to try to do that as well, but along with making sure that all of those already available pathways are still available to tribes as well.
That's great to hear. It's really neat to see how fast you all have grown, and just the tremendous growth from when you began, and how this past grant has helped with that. You also mentioned how MTERA helps with grant writing, because as we know that the capacity just to even do grant writing for many tribes is just, it's stretched thin. Can you talk about how the grant writing works with MTERA and how tribes would approach you in the Midwest and how that would all work?
Yeah, no, I think, you know, today, right now, we heavily lean on the TIC-TACs to really help MTERA support and make sure that that initiative and that objective is kind of in its realm that it needs to be. To what you said, there just needs to be a lot of capacity and a lot of resources put into some of these applications. And so MTERA is really there to kind of take in the request, analyze what it is the tribe is asking and looking for. And so we may actually, so to your first point, it's just reaching out to myself or Vanessa or one of the MTERA team members or MTERA board member tribes. They will put you in contact with us. We will analyze the request for the most part on what it is they're actually looking for. And so there's a lot of times tribes want to just do clean energy projects, and they don't know necessarily where their tribe is at as far as capacity and their ability to move forward. And so it's really just helping tribes fine tune what their real objectives and goals are, and then making sure that you identify the gaps in the resources by using the TIC-TACs, which have built in some of the resources, specifically grant writers. And so not just, we say grant writers as a catch-all, because if you've been in grant writing, you understand that grant writing is not just writing a narrative and a work plan, but it's also going through the budgeting and contractual, or not budgeting and contractual, but construction details of that application. And so you may have a great grant writer, but you don't have nobody to do the cost analysis. And so MTERA will come in, look at it, they're like, Dan, we got a grant writer, we're running a great narrative, but this cost analysis piece is just, we can't do it. MTERA puts you in contact with a TIC-TAC resource, which specifically works on the cost analysis piece with the tribe to fulfill that application piece. And so we don't want to lead the application too much. We still want the tribes to really take on that first initial lift, identifying goals and objectives. And really it's just MTERA's job to fine tune those objectives and then make sure we're identifying the resources respectfully for that tribe. And so to your first question, just reach out to us, just send an email and we will do our best to contact you right back and get working with you to make sure that we're addressing your needs.
Yeah, some great points there. And you mentioned how you went from 35 to 36. Is this tribe in Illinois? This is new to me. Is it a state recognized tribe, or was it just recently federally recognized? It's
well,
that you mentioned in
yeah, so it is a new federally recognized tribe, and you're putting me on the spot. So it is a.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
all right.
No, it's fine. It's the Prairie Band of Potawatomi, and so the Department of Interior just federally recognized that tribe.
Okay, great. No, I didn't know that. So awesome. Well, thank you. And then Carrie, are you still there? I'm sorry.
Oh, no need to apologize. I'm still here.
Okay, awesome. We had a question about the office hours format. What's that going to look like? Is it basically like people that are just working on an application and it'll just be free form? Like what does that look like?
Thanks for that question. So that will be facilitated by EnergyWorks. And I haven't coordinated one myself, but I did take a look at one when I heard this question. And it looks like how they run it is maybe a brief presentation at the beginning for about 5 minutes, but we'll stay on the whole time for that whole hour to answer questions. And I do think they envision it as a more application focused, pretty logistical, technical questions about the application, but we're there for any and all for the duration. And it'll be via Slido, which is what they used for their other webinar. Okay, got it. And then there was also a comment here that when they went to download the work plan, they noticed that it's just a template. The template is in static PDF form. Is it possible to send this individual a Word document or post an alternative way to download this so it's fillable? Or Yes, I'm so glad someone asked that question. So my colleague Isabel, who's also on this call, already reached out to EnergyWorks to see if we can get it on that webpage. So
Okay.
Hopefully that will be up soon, but if not, I can hopefully get contact information and at least send out a copy in that format.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, there doesn't appear to be any other questions. If there are further questions today, you can always submit them to indianenergy@hq.doe.gov, and we'll identify the appropriate contact and send it to them. But we just want to really thank our presenters today. So let's get started with concluding today's webinar. I just want to once again thank all of our panelists and attendees for their participation in today's webinar. Please stay tuned for announcements on future webinars through the Office of Indian Energy website, our email newsletter, and social media. Thank you again for your interest and attendance. We look forward to joining us for future webinars, and have a great day. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you.